One of the most anticipated MMORPGs revealed itself to the world recently. A game that has a setting as dark as my soul and is partially functional as my knees, my aging, shitty ass knees. That game is, of course, Chrono Odyssey. Depending on where you go on the internet, Chrono Odyssey is either the worst MMO ever made, a total scam ripoff of New World of all games, or it's a solid game with potential. I'm going to try and be a little bit more nuanced than that. And I've sat on this for a while because I wanted to kind of get my thoughts in order to really drive home what I felt and thought with this game and where I think it's going to be going. But first, if you are unaware, what is Chrono Odyssey? Well, the easiest way to describe it is a cosmic horror action MMORPG that more often than not feels like an unpolished new world with a much more interesting setting. Developed by Chrono Studio and published by Chrono Games and currently slated for release in Q4 2025, though a delay may be in order given the results of the beta, which we'll get to here in just a sec. But I also want to point out, as we're talking about this, because I mentioned Chrono Games, the studio heads making this game have promised that this game will not be pay to win. They've pinky promised that it won't be pay to win, so it probably will be. But at least we can hope, and we can hold them to that when it becomes pay to win. The beta was plagued by two primary issues. First, it had severe performance issues. While it was often playable for me, after all, I put in about 15 or so hours into the game over the beta weekend, but at times you'd chunk through the world, especially around cities. And when I say cities, I mean that very lightly because they're more like little tiny camps. Some quests would bug out. At one point, I just straight up fell through the world and got stuck. Oh shit, I think I'm stuck. I can't go anywhere. Oh no, I'm dying too. What the hell is this thing? Okay. Well, it's only one way to go, I guess. Here it goes, you know. The fuck? Hello? Hello? Is it me you're looking for? I can't sing. Oh shit. Additionally, the visuals, while aggressively kind of just fine, do not match the beauty shown off in the trailers, especially the early trailers that had just a ton of fidelity to them, like groundbreaking fidelity. And I think this is where part of the issue comes in. The graphics of the game, if they just showed these graphics that you see in the B-roll, I think people would have been fine with. But when you show better graphics than that, people are gonna be upset. The build was apparently a year old, and the team behind Chrono Odyssey has come out and made some statements reacting to the, at best, mixed feedback of the game. Bongun Bay was quoted as saying, "After the 3-day CBT ended, I spent a great deal of time monitoring every live stream on Twitch and YouTube. Together with our directors and our vice president, we had many deep and thoughtful discussions. We are truly, wholeheartedly committed to this game. With new elements to be tested in the second CBT, our team is already bracing for another intense and fast-paced period of development. I'm personally doing my best to respond to as many messages as I can, because as the person ultimately responsible for this project, it's my duty to face all feedback head on. Once again, thank you sincerely. We've taken in all your thoughts with open minds, and we promise to return with a thoroughly improved experience." This reads to me as, we know that you didn't like what we gave you in a lot of ways, but we think we have a good game. We just need to refine it, and maybe we can do that and actually deliver something you like. I don't know if that's the case. I don't think anyone knows if that's the case, but at least they're acknowledging, without being super defensive here, that yes, what they gave as the closed beta test wasn't a fantastic first impression for a lot of people. Oh yeah, and there was this comment here about some of the weirder looking characters in the game. Papa? Papa? Am I a real boy? Am I a real boy, Papa? Father, am I a real boy? Since then, they've also released a lengthy dev post describing some of the changes they're making to multiple aspects of the game, many of which are my critiques of the game. It sounds like they're approaching just about every bit of player feedback. First, they're looking at overhauling combat mechanics to refine hit feedback timing, separating motion and combat packet data, and introducing a new weapon progression system. If this weapon progression system that they add is one where they throw in like failing enhancements, I will throw my computer out the window. Please don't do that shit. Especially not if it has fail things and potential to buy things to reduce said fail chances. Please don't. They're tackling the camera issues and controls with fixes to the lock-on mechanics and inconsistent collision. To improve performance, they're changing how assets are rendered to use instant static mesh systems and trim sheets to reduce GPU load and memory usage, as well as loading collision data dynamically based on proximity and line of sight. For graphics which at times felt underwhelming or unpolished, they're going to be implementing a revised lighting system, DLSS and FSR support, temporal super resolution settings, and shader consolidations. And all of that sounds great, but it's just words for now. Can't go much from here. I'm not gonna sit here and say this is amazing and this is gonna solve all the problems, because I don't know if it will. There was a general feel of issues in the game. I don't know how to place it. We're gonna talk about it all here in a little bit, but there was just a lot that needs to be polished, and I don't know if this is gonna solve it, and especially because I don't know how this is actually going to be implemented and what it might cost or take away if things are implemented poorly, and what other issues may spring up. So we just have to wait and see what actually comes once they've done these things. But one thing I did want to highlight here is in that same post, they talked about not wanting to rush into the other issues that they have, because they're aware that they have other issues, like with their UI and UX. As well as sound design, which yes, they did have some issues with sound design, as well as progression, and perhaps most importantly, server stability. But they want to get these fixes right first, and this approach sounds to me, without speculating too much, like they may be willing, if necessary, to delay. And I wish more games would consider delays rather than trying to force something out just to get it out. The whole graveyard of MMOs is just full of games that could have had a much bigger audience if they'd perhaps just waited a little bit longer, perhaps headlined by the one and only Vanguard Saga of Heroes. I've linked the whole dev post down below if you want to like get your hands dirty and read the meteor notes that I kind of skipped over here. But I really hope that this is the start of solving some of these problems. Because let's not even freaking dance around it. If this game doesn't fix its performance issue, it's dead. It's just dead. And I don't like saying that shit about games. In fact, I try and support games as much as I can, especially as long as I see games continuing to make progress. But if there's one constant about the MMO fan, besides being completely cynical and hating everything and just like lashing out in general, it's that we have performance as our number one. Like just in general, it doesn't matter how good a game may be if you can't play the game, if it lags too much, if things don't work, if PvP doesn't work, if you die to lag, if you get server disconnects, you're not going to play it. You just won't. There are too many other options out there, and no amount of setting, no amount of combat, no amount of itemization systems, no amount of lore or anything else will solve that issue of bad performance. This is true of just about every single MMORPG. I remember how EverQuest 2 fell victim to this in 2004 when its performance just could not keep up. There were so many issues. I personally had to upgrade my computer multiple times in order to play EverQuest 2 in 2004. I remember begging my parents for that. It's tough if you can't get that key piece correct. Now, granted, with a caveat here, of course, that this was a test, and so performance issues were expected, but still. Based on recent comments from the creative director of Chrono Odyssey, it looks like it may be delayed. We don't have an official word on that yet, but the most recent comments are that the CB2, the closed beta 2, may not even be coming in 2025. And of course, if that happens, the launch is not coming in Q4 2025. So maybe look for this game in 2026 at the earliest, which is probably a good thing. Now, I played as much of this game as I could. I had some moments I enjoyed, and I had some moments that had me concerned and worried. And I think that's why I can best describe my feelings around Chrono Odyssey after testing it as mixed. And that's saying it's mixed, even if I set aside these performance issues, hoping that they get fixed. The rest of the game had me feeling a bit mixed. I saw someone say that Chrono Odyssey feels like a very solid indie MMO trying to be a AAA MMO. And I feel like that's really, really freaking accurate. There's just some roughness in just about literally everything, from visuals to UI to movement. It's like there's this really solid base there that just needs more refining. You've probably heard a lot of people compare it to New World, and it definitely plays a lot like New World. But there's one big difference. New World was very polished, especially in combat. Just not its UI or chat or allowing all the injection of HTML into chats, and so you had sausages all over screen, and that they had very small server sizes, and some of those performance issues came up as they tried to rapidly scale up the server sizes. So maybe it wasn't as polished as I thought after all, but it had a lot of polish in other areas like sound effects and everything like that. Oh, it didn't have swimming, but it had really great lighting systems. It had a myriad of other issues like a story or world lore that didn't really make all that much sense or wasn't all that compelling, or any really coherence in its design between PvE and PvP, but it did play well. That's not been the case for Chrono Odyssey. I think the strongest thing this game has going for it is its dark cosmic horror setting and its very obvious drive toward PvE. It sets it apart. And its worst thing is its performance. So I guess kind of like the opposite of New World. Even though there's obviously a whole lot of, let's just call it inspiration from New World. I mean, hell, the last MMO where I remember you could cut enemies in half was Age of Conan. And granted, this isn't quite as visceral as those were, but it's not the kind of thing we normally see. Okay, so maybe it is as visceral. That body went flying. Holy shit. There's some uniqueness here, and some of the settings, some of the visuals of this game look really freaking cool because they look so different. They don't look like your traditional fantasy MMO setting. So let's get into some pros and cons so you can understand where I'm at with this game and hoping for the best as they make changes to it. Combat is solid for an action RPG. It's very much in line with what you'd expect from New World or Bless Online. I've seen some people commenting that the combat is kind of repetitive, and I'll be completely honest here, I want to get on my little high horse and get really petty about that, because that's how I feel about all action MMORPGs. Elder Scrolls Online feels very repetitive to me. So does Black Desert Online, extremely repetitive for me because it's very much doing the same thing over and over again. New World, that kind of combat feels the same thing over and over again. It doesn't really change a whole lot. And that's kind of how it is here. And because of how this game is built, you're also not really building class synergies or anything like that. Everyone kind of does the same thing. Although I do have to give a little caveat here that they didn't have all the classes available. They didn't have the Paladin, they didn't have the Sorcerer, so perhaps that changes a little bit. But I still enjoyed the combat that I did get to play. I enjoyed getting to fling myself at enemies with my chain axes. And I enjoyed having to use dodge, which actually goes into another positive: difficulty. As you gain better gear and skills, the open world starts to feel a bit too easy. But early on, deaths feel like a clingy friend just hanging around behind you every step you take. Or that it could be in part just because I'm shit at games. But I did feel at least like the game wanted me to pay attention, especially with group or open world targets that could do significant chunks of damage and leave you dead. The game wants you to dodge or overlevel your gear and become OP at least. I will note here that death wasn't really a big deal. There's not really a crazy death penalty or anything like this in this game. It is very accessible in that way. And I also know that for many people, especially fans of this channel, not having a good death penalty will, make you a little sad that this game isn't more punishing. Boss NPCs, especially those in the open world, pose a significant challenge, and I would love to give them a positive with no caveats, no cattiness, no like me whining, although I whine a lot, but I can't. Because these bosses, as cool as they are and as much fun as I had getting together with random people and what is essentially soft grouping to kill them, well, it relies on the same thing that was like a thrive or die type of thing for Warhammer Online when they had public quests. Public quests were great when you had 10 to 20 people just randomly showing up on the public quest. When you didn't, and it was just you, or you and like 2 other people, they sucked. They were just bad content because it's like this dungeon type thing that's in the open world, but you can't actually do anything with it. And because they're often lower level or multiple things all throughout the levels, people level past them and then they don't do them. So I would love if they looked at this, since they're looking at all kinds of things in this game and what they can fix, and made this dynamic. Make these open world bosses increase in difficulty or decrease in difficulty based on just the general amount of players around that area. So let's say you have 100 people in that zone, then they're going to be difficult. Not made for 100 people, don't get me wrong, but if you have 2 people in the zone, they won't be. So it's still content that can be doable even when, as happens with every MMO, people level up and go beyond it. So the person coming in 6 months later still gets to enjoy that content, just not quite as fun as the person 6 months before. You know what I mean? Basically fix the problem that public quests couldn't fix during the run of Warhammer Online. One of the other positives in this game, though, that really brought me some excitement and hope for it is the emergent gameplay that I found. From dynamic quests to in-world group bosses to chests to little jumping puzzles to solo and small group dungeons throughout the world. But also, fuck those solo dungeons and their jump puzzles that just make you feel so dumb. Or make me feel dumb because I suck at puzzles. Because it's just puzzles. It's not really fighting things. This game, in my opinion, is doing questing right. I did not at any point feel like this was your typical quest hub MMO. Yes, they had bounties and things that you would all get in the little, little cities that you had. Not really cities, more like outposts. But at the same time, many quests were found out all around the world. You just went out and explored and you found things to do and you found things that were beneficial, and even fighting things was beneficial to your leveling process. Having some random guy yell at me because he's naked and needs to be saved from a waterfall, or wandering across a caravan that had been ambushed, or talking to a stranger out in the wood whose friend had his face cut into pieces. Yeah, and wants you to go find those pieces of their face, like their ears, nose, their cheeks, and bring back all the face pieces. I did say this game has a dark tone, right? Like, it's pretty dark. But stuff like that made me enjoy the game more because I didn't feel like the most beneficial, the way that I had to play the game was go get a bunch of quests, as many quests as I could possibly get, and then go on an adventure. I could go get some quests and then I could wander around. I could see another quest NPC, or a quest could just like happen upon me, like the one with the naked man yelling at me, which ended up being a chain of quests. And I can find those things in the world. Those kind of quests I think are so essential to move away from the World of Warcraft style of quest hubs and make it worthwhile to explore. Hide some of the best things outside of those quest hubs. And I think that's kind of what they're going for, because they keep talking about this game as being a non-linear game. And I really hope that they really lean into more of that emergent gameplay, these quests that you go and find just by exploring. And beyond that, it didn't fall into the trap of Throne and Liberty, which pissed me off so much about that game, of just putting every single mob type in one place and you just go kill those and that's part of the quest. Like you have 700 wolves in one little area, so you can kill all of them for the quest that have you go kill the wolves in that one little area, and no biological diversity at all, so they must be kind of like cannibalizing each other. I don't know, but this one feels a bit more handcrafted than Throne and Liberty did. And my last positive though is my biggest positive, and it's the setting. The setting of the game by far is better than anything else. It appeals to the deep dark edgelord festering inside of me that yearns for emo music, black eyeliner, and to leave comments on Reddit. The dark cosmic horror setting, complete with enemy decapitations, heroes getting impaled by giant swords, and some of the coolest and most unique enemy designs I've seen in an MMO in some time, and an intriguing story that feels different from other MMOs, is the draw for me. It still follows the chosen one trope, which, yeah, it gets really kind of annoying, but the world itself, the lore, and all it builds up are well worth it. It felt fresh, and that's not something I've said about a new MMO in a long time. And with that chosen one trope, I do want to throw out here that I didn't feel forced to solo the way I have in some other games. That may change later on, and yes, there are certain things you had to go and do by yourself, like go and do boss fights, but it was literally just go do this one boss fight and then you're done, and then you can go rejoin your friends. I really hate when an MMO creates this barrier, this forced barrier between you and other players. There's a line between forcing grouping and encouraging grouping, but the absolute like worst thing for me in an MMO is when they force solo. That's, I think, the like far worse to me than forcing grouping. It's an MMO, let me play with my friends when I want to play with my friends. And it was pretty accessible to do so. I was able to join friends and play with them however I wanted to. But now we gotta talk about the cons, and some of them we've already talked about a bit. The first, we just have to start with performance, right? Like we just have to, because it was bad. There was lots of random lagging and chunking through the game, especially in the little towns. Zone times are very slow in the places where there are zones, essentially going into dungeons or the little Elden Ring table area like this takes ages. Oh, and remember the frustrations over the jump puzzles in solo dungeons? It doesn't help that the platforms themselves are skipping frames. But I think the most damning part of this, nothing in the game feels like it warrants the performance issues. The game does not look like it should struggle like this. It's not groundbreaking or outrageously beautiful. It doesn't have enough physics to make it feel this way. The visuals can be good, but they don't warrant these performance issues. This feels like a deeper problem, and it's the thing that has me the most concerned about the game. Hell, they're even degrading the visuals to improve your performance as you go through the game, and it was still stuttering. You'll visually see rocks add in textures as you go from 20 to 10 to 5 feet away, them using low poly models in their place, and there's still these issues. There's also plenty of areas that don't seem finished, like it's just these rock textures and nothing else there. The low resolution textures in several blank areas with no foliage, as well as the lack of collision with NPCs or flora, make it feel kind of cheap, especially for what it's going for, trying to be a revolutionary MMO. If this had more physics going on, if it had better lighting that didn't pop in and out, I'd understand the issues a lot better. Speaking of, it needs polish. And I think that's another big negative. Everything in the game is just kind of off. Movement, UI interaction, looting, it's all just kind of slightly off. There's no one thing to point to here like there is with performance. It's just a combination of everything, kind of like wearing clothes that work, but they don't quite fit. Input delay and interactions with the world, movement jankiness, especially when going over uneven terrain or trying to climb. It's just all these small things that add up to this unsatisfying feeling. It makes me worried about the game launching in 2025 because it's stuff they can't polish, but they need time to do it. And again, it's why I'm going to use this video to try and implore anyone who may be watching from Chrono Studios, delay if you need to, and I think a delay might be warranted here. Finally, simplistic is another negative. This is going to be more personal to me and the kind of mmorpgs I like, well, EverQuest, but there's an ongoing trend with action MMOs that create this overly simplistic dynamic when it comes to class building, because each class is built to be able to do kind of everything, just with a little bit of a different flavor. With the caveat that we did not have all the classes in the game, of course, for this beta, including the sorcerer, which may or may not have a healing build. Everyone essentially does the same things. They DPS and they dodge. Most fights are generally just running around, dodging in and out of attacks and spamming your DPS abilities. Maybe your DPS abilities are from range. Maybe your DPS abilities require you to be up close, but you're basically all doing the same thing. And that is a big part of a lot of action MMOs, because they're designed with this idea of soloing more so than grouping. So there's not really a whole lot of class dynamics, which makes it simplistic. And I will add the caveat here that perhaps the depth gets a lot better as you get deeper into the game. Perhaps as you get into more challenging group content or raid content, it gets more dynamic and you have to do more things, especially, and there's more class synergy. And maybe even having the paladin and the sorcerer changes the game up a lot. But at least what I got to play, which is the only thing I can go on, it was simple. And last, and perhaps the thing that I was kind of just really disappointed about, the time mechanics feel gimmicky. They don't feel that great. It was one of the things I was worried about, and while yes, stopping time does feel fun, and summoning giant helpers is cool and all, it's not exactly innovative or all that interesting. It doesn't feel like it adds all that much to the game other than an oh shit button that everyone has to share. And it's almost like the same thing where everyone is a DPS, everyone has the same time abilities too. There's not a whole lot of differentiation there. In conclusion, with a whole heap of caveats that this is a first look, not a full review, and that it is a beta, the results are mixed with the potential to be awful, and a lot of work for the team behind Chrono Odyssey to do before launch, but still a sliver of hope that this could be a really good MMO. All eyes will be on the CBT2 to see if in fact it is more performant, if it looks better, and if it's just altogether a more complete experience. The dev post is a baby step in the right direction, but right now the game feels like it needs a leap, given it's being published by Kakao and should have a lot of money to do so. And indie game sins only work on an indie game budget. At least that's in my opinion. My name is Edward Flynn. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day, and I will see you all later.